Where'd you go? If you were me.
Alaska.
Yeah?
Yeah, if I were your age, starting fresh. Alaska. It's the last frontier. Up there, you could be anything you want.
Alaska. Start over. Start fresh.
One could.
Welcome to episode number 19 of the Batman on Film Satellite Show podcast. This is the BOF podcast where we talk about anything we want to in pop culture and not Batman, because there's like 47 other podcasts on this feed that are reserved for Batman. So I'm the founder of Batman on Film, Bill Ramey, and with me is, again, to talk about Breaking Bad universe. By popular demand, Makenzie, we are back to talk about more Breaking Bad universe stuff. This is Makenzie McNeill. She also is my daughter. How are you, Makenzie?
I'm good. Since the cold weather is coming back to Albuquerque, which means it's super dry. This is going to sound gross, but I'm going to give it to you straight. I feel like I'm both drowning internally and drying out at the same time.
Okay.
So I might sound gross today, but otherwise I'm doing pretty well. It's kind of cold today. We have a low of 30, so I'm bundled up right now.
Have you taken any more Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul tours since the last time we spoke on this podcast?
I've not done any official tours, but last Friday I did eat at the Owl Cafe, which if Breaking Bad fans, if that rings a bell, that's because Walt and Jesse ate there in season 4, and they also eat there in El Camino. It's basically it's a restaurant that it's physically built like an owl. It has an owl head at the very top of the building. It's a very retro kind of 50s diner inside. It was really good, and I was excited that I got to eat there last week.
Is there a Walter White booth?
I was looking for some plaque or something that said that that's where they sat. I didn't see anything. I could have missed it, but I did, in my mind, I mentally noticed, oh, that's probably where they sat in the movie and in the show.
Okay.
And I was very giddy, but I don't think we sat there, but it was exciting for me.
How is the Huel Babineau? It's like a Funko Pop, but it's not a Funko Pop.
Yeah, he's still on my desk, and I giggle at it every time I see it.
All right. When I went to Memphis this summer, there were several places you could eat, and they would have the Elvis booth or Elvis table, and they would say Elvis ate here. Now, that's probably true, but you can just always say, well, Elvis ate here back in 1956, and they could just be making that up. But I thought they would have a plaque for that Walter White booth. So
yeah, they might have, but I might have missed it. When I did the Breaking Bad tour last year, and they took us to the filming location for Los Pollos Hermanos, they didn't tell people that this is the booth where Saul sat or Walt sat or the twins, but they said obviously this is where they filmed it, and so everyone try and find the seat. And so everyone was kind of politely fighting for the booth that they thought that's where the scene was filmed. And then once everyone sat down, they told us, these are the booths where scenes were filmed.
Does Albuquerque get tourism bump from people coming to do Breaking Bad stuff? I'm sure they do.
Yeah, it was a few months ago when the final season of Better Call Saul was on, and one of our local news stations did a story about the tourism that this universe has brought. And I don't remember the exact number, so I don't want to misquote anything, but I think it was millions upon millions of dollars every single year. And they also interviewed the directors, the owners, I'm not sure their exact title, of whoever runs the RV tour. And
Yes.
they
Okay.
said that tourism is just as busy as it was when Breaking Bad was on TV. And
Okay.
I still see the little RV bus going around town sometimes. So
On
it's
my
cool to
bucket list. It's on my bucket list. I'm 57, so I have to have a bucket list now. All right. What else was I going to ask you before we move on here? I guess nothing. All right. So, so with that, I'm going to kind of turn this show over to Makenzie, and we're going to discuss the only spin-off movie so far, right? So far of Breaking Bad and I guess the Breaking Bad universe. So the floor is yours.
Okay. So, like you said, we will be discussing El Camino, the only movie
Mm-hmm.
so far in the Breaking Bad universe. And I kind of drafted some questions that I thought are
Yes.
really helpful to dissect this movie and the ending for Jesse, who is a very beloved character in the universe. So maybe just to start with a baseline discussion, do you think El Camino was a satisfying or a fitting end for Jesse?
Yes. He's like the only one that got any sort of happy ending. Unless you want to argue that Saul, the ending Saul got was a positive for him. He was happy with the outcome, but at least, of course, but Saul's in prison for the rest of his life, probably. And Jesse, we don't know. He got to Alaska. He got there. Now, don't know what happened, but I guess we could speculate. Like, what did you write in your head of what happened to Jesse? So yes, I think it was a satisfying ending for Jesse Pinkman.
Yeah, and I think it's in the third to last episode of season 6 of Better Call Saul, where Jimmy and or Gene at the time and Francesca were talking on the phone, and she mentions that the feds found, whose car was it? Was it Skinny Pete's car or Badger's car, whatever, down by the border of Mexico? And
Badger, yeah, it was Badger's car, right? Yeah,
so obviously they took the bait. They believe
yeah.
that Jesse fled to Mexico. So obviously the ploy worked. So they'll probably never be looking north of that. They'll assume he went south. So I mean that's one of the other questions. We can go ahead and talk about it.
Yes.
Let me see where did I put it in my little list. But do you think that Jesse will be able to find peace and redemption in Alaska, or do you think he'll be constantly looking over
Oof.
his shoulder, afraid that the feds will find him?
Well, I mean, I think that you probably always are looking over your shoulder if you're in that situation. I think there was like here recently some guy died and he was like, I don't know, and almost 80, and he had lived his whole life. I think it was up in Massachusetts. Did you see that, read about this? And he ended up,
No.
when he was like 19 in the 1960s, he pulled off this huge bank heist and then just disappeared, and then went to like Massachusetts and lived his whole life until he died, um, under a different name, and was like this golf pro and like a pillar of the community. So I think even with him, I'm sure, I mean, you're always thinking about it, but um, I think that well, Mike tells him in the beginning that, he's never going to find redemption or peace. So that kind of foreshadows maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's free, but don't know what happens to him. I don't know if I know. I don't know if I want to know what happens to him, because you can make it up in your mind.
Yeah,
And
and maybe that's what
yeah.
Vince Gilligan wanted to do,
Yes,
was
I'm sure.
fans to create their own narrative in their heads.
Yes. Chris Nolan told me that about like when they in Batman Begins at the end, the Joker card moment, that wasn't, even though the Joker ended up being in the Dark Knight in the sequel, when he made Batman Begins, it wasn't there to set up a sequel. Batman Begins was like a self-contained film, and the Joker card was there to say, okay, this world is expanding and fans can continue the story in their minds, whatever that way they want to. So, and he kind of does that for all of his movies, if you watch Chris Nolan's film. So I'm sure that was part of the deal with Jesse.
Yeah, well, you kind of already alluded to it. One of the other discussion points I thought of is comparing the endings of the three major characters in the
Yes.
universe.
Yeah.
Walt obviously dies presumably happy, or at least
Yeah.
at peace, as it well, as at peace as you can be, given what he did. Saul obviously goes to prison, presumably for the rest of his life, and he seems kind of content, or at least he feels that he deserves it, which he does. And then Jesse gets some form of freedom, but do you think it's true freedom? Because he'll be constantly paranoid, perhaps,
Yeah.
that if he makes one mistake, he'll be found out, like what happened to Saul.
I think Jesse probably doesn't want to get caught. I think somewhere deep down, Jimmy McGill, Jimmy wanted to get caught.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was getting away with it for the most part, living in Omaha and working at the Cinnabon. But then he got super reckless, and it was kind of like he was trying to get caught. And he ends up like with Saul, he ends up being in prison, but he's going to be maybe more of a big man and more of a success in prison than he would be in outside here, than he ever was as Jimmy or Saul or Gene. So I guess, and Walt, I mean, he didn't end up dying from cancer, and he died in the meth lab, and he looked like he was happy when at the end. So I think Jesse will be more careful. I think he wanted out of it more than any of the others did, maybe except for, I mean, you can argue with Jimmy with that, but even though he'll be looking over his shoulder, I think he'll play it safe. In my mind, in my fan fiction mind, he's going to play it. He'll go up there, and maybe he gets a job. He'll get a job doing something and just play it safe.
In my mind, he becomes a fisherman.
A fisherman? Okay.
Yeah, or yeah, he lives on the coast somewhere.
Yeah.
And goes out to the coast and fishes salmon and Dungeness crab or whatever, and smokes for the rest of the sailors.
I thought that, yeah, I thought fishing of some sort, also like that, that Alaska gold hunt thing. Maybe he becomes a gold hunter. I don't know. I know. Maybe he does both. That's what it is in my mind. He does both.
Yeah. Well, kind of in that same vein, because he fled and the feds think he went south.
Yes.
What do you think happens to Jesse's family and Skinny Pete and Badger? Because obviously Jesse contacted all of them before he fled. And so the feds will probably be looking into those connections. Do you think that kind of leaves his family in a precarious situation? Skinny Pete and Badger, they were already in that universe. They kind of expected that to happen to them. But what do you think happens to his family?
He played his parents, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that nothing happens to them, because he was acting like he was going to turn himself in and all that stuff. And they believed it. They weren't hiding him to keep him from being caught. They wanted him to, turn himself in. So Well, Skinny Pete had a good plan, right? I mean, it was like, I'll just say you showed up and I always wanted El Camino, so we just switched pink slips and that was it,
Mm-hmm.
And he's such a small fish. Why would they worry about him or Badger,
Yeah, I've seen lots of discussions on the internet and YouTube of how Skinny Pete pulled that very clever plan just kind of out of his butt, to say it
Yeah.
politely. And it was so surprising because, Skinny Pete and Badger don't come across as neuroscience scientists. So the fact that he came up with a very good plan that obviously worked was really surprising. So maybe he's way smarter than he looks.
Yes. What does he say?
I
He's
wouldn't
like,
I would not
yeah,
have come up with that plan
no,
given the pressure that they were under and the time that was running against them. So it was a very good plan.
it was, yes. And then he's like, when, Jesse asked him, why are you doing this? He's like, like, yo, you're like my hero, So
Yeah.
it was
And then
funny. So
skulks back to the house. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So
So I think,
you think Skinny Pete and Badger will get off?
yes,
Be fine.
I don't think they're going to, they're so, like I said, they're so small potatoes that they're not, it's not worth even going after them.
Mm-hmm. And you think at some point the feds will probably leave Jesse's family alone, but maybe will monitor them
Probably.
occasionally to see if
Yeah.
Jesse
If he shows
contacts
up.
them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he's too smart. In my mind, he's too smart to contact his parents. So
Yeah.
especially he got away. So
One thing that I found interesting, and this is one of the other talking points or questions I thought of, is obviously Jesse writes Brock a letter.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
surprised he didn't write his little brother a
Yeah.
letter. So, and that's just a thing I thought of that was interesting. What do you think he tells Brock in his
I
letter?
don't know. What's the what are some of the theories? What's your theory? What's some of the theories you've seen, if you've seen any?
I haven't seen many theories. My theory is Jesse probably apologizes for kind of being in and out of his life. Maybe apologizes for the tumultuous relationship that he had with his mom, Andrea,
Yeah.
because they were kind of going back and forth.
Yeah.
Seasons 3 to 5. I think he just apologizes and says, I'm sorry that I can't explain everything to you, but know that I care,
Yeah.
or something
Yeah.
like that, or you can go on and live a good life. Probably something to that effect. I doubt he tells her what happened to his mom. I think
Yeah.
that'd be really horrific
Yeah.
for him to tell Brock that. So that's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say that it's kind of a way to and you leave it open and kind of or leave it to the viewer to again write their own story there, but it makes you sympathetic to Jesse even more than maybe you already are. Because it's I want to say a good look for him, but it's like he does care about other people,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to Walter White really didn't care about anybody but himself.
Right.
So it
Yeah,
makes him a little bit more
we
likable.
we saw that side of Jesse. I think the episode was called Peekaboo in season 2, Breaking Bad, where Jesse's trying to get the money back from, what was that guy's name? Spooge, and his
Spooge,
wife that
yeah,
he keeps calling a skank or
yeah,
or something like that. And Jesse really has compassion for the little boy that was caught in that terrible situation.
yes, for sure. What did what did you think about the whole, the flashback story with what's his name? I having a
Todd.
mind. Todd, yes, Todd.
It made me hate Todd even more.
Yeah,
He's such a psychopath.
yes,
Yeah. how casual he was, that he had to kill his cleaning lady and wrap her
Yeah.
body up in the carpet. Oh my gosh. And then he was singing in the car
Yeah.
as Jesse's being thrown around in the trunk. So I think the flashbacks just show you how terrible and horrific Jesse's life was, I think, for the 6 months, I think it's 6 months or so,
Yeah.
that he was basically a slave for
Yeah.
white supremacist gang. I think it just gave you more insight into what was happening while Walt was hiding away. Where was he? New Hampshire, Vermont,
Yes.
somewhere
Yeah.
up there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I liked it, and it made me dislike Todd even more, which makes me like the character, because he was like, and really appreciate the acting job he did to make you dislike him that much. And he is, and I thought about that this morning. Like I told you, I got up and I watched it again. He is such a sociopath, and it's just so nonchalant about all this, about all of that, and the scene where, when Jesse gets the gun and ends up giving it back to him, which, when I'm watching it, I mean, I know how it plays out, because that's, because we know, but you're like, just shoot him,
yeah.
and it just like, it showed how they had almost like completely broken him altogether,
Yeah. Well, maybe because I'm kind of done with my list of what I thought were the most interesting, important questions to address. But overall, did you like the movie?
Yes,
Like, how
I
would you
like.
rank it on a letter system?
Oh, if I was grading it,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just as good as Breaking Bad. It's just a continuation of that, and Breaking Bad is an A, so this is an A for me. It plays more like a extended episode of Breaking Bad than it does like a movie, and that's fine, because it feels like Breaking Bad in those episodes. So yeah, I really liked it. I'm glad they made it, and I don't know. I mean, Vince Gilligan kind of he's never not said he would revisit the Breaking Bad universe. So I'm wondering, I mean, like, what other type of projects or movies like this you could do. I don't know if I want to know definitively what happens to Jesse. I
I
kind of
want to know
like
what happens to Kim.
to Kim. Now that's a whole different conversation there. And I think they've kicked that around, doing a Kim Wexler
Yeah. I want to see
series.
Cheryl take everything from Kim for what she
You're
and
still
Jimmy.
okay. You still want more from on Kim,
Yes.
to pay a little bit more. Okay.
Yes, because I mean, what they did to Howard was nuts and
Yes.
terrible, and he didn't deserve that. And the indirect reason that he got shot in the head
Yeah.
and why his body is below a meth lab. He was probably the only good dude in that whole show, like
Yeah.
consistently. I mean, he was just caught in the middle of a lot of crap, and that's ultimately kind of what led to his demise. But yes, I'm
Yeah.
still on the bandwagon of Kim needs to get what's coming to her. Maybe a
Well,
little too adamantly, but we'll see.
we will see. I think we'll get more of the Breaking Bad universe.
Well, for me,
So
the
yeah,
first time I watched the movie, I didn't know how I felt about it.
yeah,
It just wasn't what I was expecting, which can be a good thing. But because the cinematography was obviously different, the color grading was different. To me, it just felt, you said it, you felt like it was an extension of the Breaking Bad universe. Watching it now, it definitely does. The first time I watched it, I didn't feel like it had that same consistency. But maybe that's because, it's a movie, it's not a TV show. It's on a different platform on
yeah,
Netflix instead of AMC. But you could also argue that Better Call Saul feels very differently too, because the
yeah.
cinematography is drastically different. They're not using the same team.
It's shot more for as a film.
Yeah.
So they had, you know, the cinematography, that part of it. Yes, it feels like a movie. I just, like I said, I think it plays out just like a long version of like a long, like a extended, like I said, extended version of a better a Breaking Bad episode, which is fine. I mean, because that's what it is, kind of, sort of.
Yeah. And I was glad we got to see some other characters that we like, such as Skinny Pete and Badger.
Well, that's a show right there. They should do a Skinny Pete and Badger show or movie.
I would watch it. They're so fun. They're stupid because they're probably zonked out of their minds, but they're so funny.
Yeah.
And I liked seeing Jesse's parents again. And I think Walt's cameo, it made sense, but I was a little too distracted because you could tell that Bryan Cranston was wearing a bald cap. And I don't think that was his fault. He probably had another scheduling conflict where he couldn't go fully bald. So that was a little distracting for me. I thought he looked more like himself in the cameos in Better Call Saul season 6. But you know, those are little things that the production team can't control. And so I'll give them grace because it was probably beyond what they could control.
Yeah.
But I think watching it now, I like it way more. It's grown on me. So I think it is a satisfying ending for Jesse. And I'm glad he was able to get some semblance of peace. I think between Walt, Saul, and Jesse, he probably deserved it the most.
Well, I would certainly like to talk more about the Breaking Bad universe. So maybe we take on Breaking Bad, the series, and talk about, we'd have to do it. We could do it by season, maybe 2 shows a season. So for all those folks who like us talking about the Breaking Bad stuff, there probably will be more to come. So that's all I got for El Camino. I'll watch it again. It's yes, it'll be in my it's in my rotation because I got to go back on Breaking Bad. Yeah.
What did you think about Jane showing up at the very end?
Well,
I loved seeing that, even though she probably would have accidentally killed him from a drug overdose.
I always, I got like two or three thoughts in my mind that are they're mixing in. So I'm trying to say it's I think you needed to see Jane because that was devastating for Jesse on all sorts of levels, especially because I mean Walter White just let her die. Could have saved her. He killed her basically, kind of. He played a hand in it by omission. Yeah, I think you had to have that scene in that because it's part of his story as well. And I kind of like it's I kind of like, and I do like the way they wrote it. So that she's kind of like, did you take it her kind of like her saying like you just got to do what you have to do, you know, don't worry about things you can't control. I'm trying to exactly what there's a point to it. Am I on the right track there?
Yeah, I think she says something to the effect of, or it begins with Jesse saying, "Your philosophy, it's cool, yo," or something like that. And I think the quote was, "You got to let the universe take you, or it's taking you," or something like that. And Jane is like, "That's a terrible philosophy." And she said something to the effect of, "She's always let the universe take her almost unwillingly where she is going, and she can't do that anymore." It's something like that. That's at least the message that I got out of it. And in my mind, the Jane that appears in his daydream or whatever it is the Jane before they started doing drugs again.
Yeah.
Because I think that's when, in the show, that's when they're their happiest.
Yeah.
And it spirals once they get on, what was it, heroin? Something like that. So
It's
I think that was the Jane before all of that.
it was closure for that
Mm-hmm.
that arc of that part of Jesse's arc, I believe.
Druggy
Well,
soulmate.
thanks for coming on. You should say thanks for coming on, Dads, on my show. This is kind of your show when I think about when we do these. So I enjoy talking with you. So that's all I got. Do you have anything? I usually say, do you have anything you want to plug? Do you want to plug anything?
What does plug mean?
Do you have you want to plug social media where you say witty things? Do you want to plug or just acknowledge anything that you're doing that's interesting? Anything like that?
Well, maybe another interesting thing. Just living here, I'm going to see Breaking Bad stuff all the time. It's inevitable. So last week I ate at the Owl Cafe, which I was very giddy and tried not to make it obvious to everyone else why I was acting so weird. But I think
did they have anything on the menu that's like Breaking Bad specific related?
I didn't see anything.
Okay.
But again, I could have missed it. But this is kind of related. But speaking of menu items on stuff, there's a restaurant here, a donut shop called Rebel Donut. I believe that's the name. I haven't been yet because I'm not the biggest donut person, but they do have a Breaking Bad donut. I think it's still on the menu. So let me look it up before I give everyone false information. But at one point, they did have a Breaking Bad donut, I think called Blue Sky. And it was blue icing with blue Pop Rocks on top.
Okay.
So hang on. I'm going to look it up real quick.
All right.
Rebel Donut. Yes, homemade donuts in Albuquerque. Let me see the menu. Do they still have it? Yeah. So it's called the Blue Sky Donut. It's vanilla cake, blue cotton candy icing, and rock candy on top. So
okay.
I don't know if I would enjoy that though.
I don't think I'm not too big into sweets, so that was a little rich for me, but I would probably eat one just because it's a Breaking Bad donut. It's in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Or a bite of it, I think.
Yeah.
At least.
I have a feeling that while I'm living here, I probably need to go by just to do it. But speaking of another thing that I've seen as a plug, if you want to call it a plug, last week I was driving west. I visited Acoma Pueblo, which is about an hour or so west of Albuquerque. It's very cool. People should go visit it. It's amazing. It's the oldest continuously inhabited community in North America, or one of the oldest, most continuously inhabited places.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very cool. Anyway, as I was driving out there, I passed by Tuhajali, and if that name rings a bell, that's because that's where Jesse and Walt did their first cook, and that's also where he almost got caught by Hank. That's where that showdown happened in season 5, so that was cool to see that. I didn't visit it because I was driving down the highway. I just saw the sign for it, but
so you probably every day at some point see something that reminds you of Breaking Bad.
Oh yeah, every single day I see something. Either it's a billboard or the RV bus driving around. So yeah. I just kind of giggle and smile at myself and then continue with my day.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll be back later for some more. I'm sure we'll be back later for some more Breaking Bad universe talk. So from Makenzie, I am Bill. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Batman on Film Satellite Show, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Batman on Film Satellite Show, BOF's non-Batman pop culture podcast. Follow the show on Twitter @BOF Show. Follow BOF on Twitter @The Batman on Film. For all of Team BOF, I'm announcer Rachel. Authoritative, definitive, the original Batman on Film, established in 1998.